Joining me on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome David Auge. David is the author of Man's Search for Sustainability, which is, when you read it, quite a profound journey into how we can understand, how we can communicate, and how we can learn from other, ecosystems, this concept and this word, which has been so often misinterpreted, the word sustainability. David comes from a background of many years in industry, developing the most effective ways to communicate the concept of sustainability. And I'm hoping in this conversation is going to take us on a little bit of a journey through how insects can actually teach us some of the ways forward that will present themselves as opportunities for us as human beings. So welcome, David, to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here.
Have I got this right? I mean, there's a kind of bit of a lengthy introduction to something that is a really profound topic. Am I starting off in the right kind of angle here, the right kind of context? Because it is complicated, isn't it? Sustainability.
It is. And I start my book off with a story trying to bring that to light. It happens, and I'll start with that story, that I was at the West Point Society of Greater Houston shortly after the 9/11 events. And we had an expert there on Middle Eastern affairs who was attempting to help those that were in attendance get a better understanding of what we were about to confront. I believe sustainability has something to learn from that particular discussion. The expert, he wanted to show us who were in attendance the situation we were going to confront. And he said it can be summarized in two words. The words, it's history. And his point being that its history to a Western mindset meant that it was inconsequential. It was not to be of any measure of effort in our future endeavors. But he said to the Middle Eastern understanding, its history meant the exact opposite. That its history gave us an understanding that it was relevant, that what had happened previous to this point was of the utmost concern about what we were going to do at that time. Now, sustainability and the book that I've written attempts to bring that to light through a philosophical understanding called mimesis versus poiesis. These are concepts better explained by Aristotle and Plato, where mimesis is the understanding that in the past brought to us from mimicking the society we've had in the past or the biodiversity that we can explore in the past, we can bring to the current situation the answers that we're attempting to seek. Whereas poiesis is the idea that it's all just a blank slate. We're starting from this point without any relevance of what happened prior to this point. And as a result, with that particular perspective of poiesis, we need to start moving forward from just that point at all. Now, what I bring to the table, though, is that the United States, in its effort to address what was happening in the Middle East, began to fight a one-year war and did so for 20 years and did it over and over and over and over again with a very short expectation of what the outcome was going to be, expecting from a poetic standpoint, that's the way to do it. Well, from a mimesis or a mimetic standpoint, its history meant, no, you've got to look at the larger picture. You must look at the greater outcome of the entire understanding in order to put what we're doing on the table. And the same idea with sustainability. And the reason why I believe that these sustainable communities, honeybees and the locusts, can bring to us a much better understanding of the entire picture if we look at what they've already got in place.
And I'm going to go deep into those two communities in a little while, because I think it was fascinating, just to kind of really put into a context, I guess, the fact that this is not just a human endeavor, this whole kind of idea of being sustainable, feeling the challenges, feeling the impact of climate, of societal kind of pressures and things. This is something that is systemic in every community, be it insects, birds, amphibians, whatever, wherever you look. look, this is going to be impacting. And I guess that kind of sort of historical context is really, really important for us as humans, because it gives us that narrative and that ability to tell accurate stories that almost have meaning. Because what I'm seeing, and I'd be really interested in your take on this one, David, is that when you start to talk to people about the bigger picture, so often, things like polar bears on ice caps and, sort of floating on sort of floating icebergs that are diminishing in size, etc. It's obviously it's heart-wrenching when you see these poor creatures, but oh well, there's nothing I can do about it, so therefore I just carry on with my day. Is often something that is sort of bandied around as being one of the biggest challenges of communicating sustainability, is that almost local or personal irrelevance. But I guess what you're saying is that there is a chance and a hope, if we can start to tap into what is relevant for me, that we can start to then almost take accountability and meaning from these things. Is there something in that?
Yes, there is. There is taking something from these two communities that we see, one we love, one we hate, and bringing to the forefront, because of their contrast, what they do right and what they do wrong. The polar bears on the frozen, um, floating ice floes on the North Pole. Those bring to light a story of an individual. What I was bringing to light was the story of communities, thousands, tens of thousands, in the case of locusts, billions, at a time, acting and performing together, and what we could learn from that community and their interaction.
So let's go a little deeper into that then, because as you've described there, one community we love and we almost honor, and really definitely respect, and then this other community that we feel, oh, they're the invaders, they're the ones that I don't want in my backyard because they're just going to be carnage. Why is it kind of evolved like that? Because I'm guessing in some places in the world, the kind of the perception may be slightly different.
Well, the perception of the two communities, is that what you're saying,
Mm,
might be kind of different?
mm,
Perhaps, let's see, let's start with the honeybee. In most cases, because it's a pollinator, it's seen as a necessary attribute to something that we have in our own food system. So there's not many communities that see bees, or at least honeybees, Apis mellifera, the honeybee that creates, um, uh, an asset to the surrounding farm area. They're not usually seen by many, if any, societies as something damaging to what's going to happen. The locust, on the other hand, is almost invariably seen, except on some areas where they're also a food source, as something to be feared, something to be, um, um, suppressed as best we can, even from a United Nations type of level of impact. We need a UN organization in order to keep this particular growing community from impacting us as humans, our daily activities. It's because they are on that far end of each extreme that I thought we could learn the most from them. We could get something closer to what we like, something not so controversial. But those two are controversial when you try and say there's some things about honeybees that are to our detriment. And there are some things about what we could learn from locusts that are to our benefit. Let's learn from both of them.
So I obviously I'm going to reflect the audience here. I'm sure are thinking, what, locust? There's a benefit? Surely not.
Okay. Well, one of the things you'll see if you go to my website is I'm talking about the way that they manage certain situations. Stress in the environment of a honeybee can pretty much at some times destroy and make that particular society crumble. But stress and being able to grow from it is actually to the benefit of a locust population. They they increase in number, they increase in strength and stability. One of the things I point out in my book is that there is a phase change which occurs within the development of a locust. A locust is a grasshopper, but not all grasshoppers are locusts. There is a stress placed upon them which increases their brain size by 30%, increases the activity and color that they have in the community. They they begin to band together, and in that banding together they grow in strength to the point where they can, um, they can handle stress in a positive performance of the community, something that in many ways we are fearful as the stressors of environmental catastrophes are on our doorsteps. I'm in North Carolina, and I've heard many times what's been happening in Western North Carolina following the impact of the hurricane and what's been happening with Helene as it goes through there. But some of the stories coming out that are to the benefit is the banding together of these small communities to look for people, to once again join in community for the effort of doing something because of the situation they're in. It's strengthening them. They're strengthening the community because of what they've gone through. That stress would be something that has shown the strength also of locusts.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is it's philosophical, but it's also very, very simple, isn't it? Really, the fact that, look, if we pull together, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I mean, it's simple Gestalt theory, isn't it?
Mhm.
And yet we kind of often as humans lose sight of that. Well, why do you think that is? Because to a locust, I mean, clearly they're seeing the benefit of, okay, if we do pull together, if we do kind of flock or whatever the word is of a collection of locusts, and I'm sure there's a technical term that I'm not aware of, but if they are kind of working together to deal with this stressor, they see then a greater outcome or a positive outcome. Why is it we often miss that then as humans, do you think?
Perhaps it's going back to this mimetic versus this poetic view. We believe everything before us is merely a blank slate, building materials upon which to move into the future, as opposed to looking at the past, as opposed to understanding the simplicity that's already around us that can bring these stories to light. Now, the two communities, honeybees and locusts, have an instinctual desire for survival. The phase change that happens with the locust is something that um, is not going to happen with us. Our brain is not going to increase 30% in size because we're under stress, but we still can learn from it. We can still see this. I think our tendency is not to do so, and in our Western civilization, we 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 find ourselves frustrated because we didn't look at those opportunities, the biomimicry of a societal interaction.
So I mean, I'm guessing that if we were to look at this from a almost a nature perspective and actually see ourselves as less of this kind of egocentric, advanced kind of mammal on a pedestal, so to speak, and actually see ourselves as we're just another organic, being, sentient being actually on this planet, then actually taking that kind of almost complacency, I'm going to use that word and sort of see what you think about it, but taking that complacency out and actually thinking, no, these challenges, sustainability and other challenges, are greater than us. They're bigger than us. So if we actually kind of almost come out of our sort of ego-fueled kind of perspective and actually take it at a very simple level, is we have to take action, collective action, much like locusts would, and actually not be complacent and not kind of expect that, oh, well, it will be okay because we're human, or, oh yeah, it'll all work itself out and I don't need to do anything. But actually feel the stress. Are we saying that we need to feel that stress to almost become more locust?
Feel the stress to become more locusts. I think we can learn from the stress and the interaction with it. I don't think we can erase it and say, happiness is the absence of stress in any and all situations. There may be something more to that. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell called David and Goliath, where he talks about the desire of very wealthy men to give to their sons or their daughters not money, but the challenging experiences that made them wealthy. It wasn't the absence; it was the presence of those struggles that helped them as millionaires, as very wealthy men and women grow. Not the absence of it. And I think that's what we could take from the locusts or from the bees or um, uh, the allocation of work and the uniformity of which bees bring to the situation. We can learn from these situations and not shrink from them.
Mm. So the bee side of things, we've kind of given a little bit of profile here to the locusts, and I guess that was what lots of people would be curious about. It's like, how can you bring locusts in here, and how can they be the good guys? And we kind of sort of said there's stuff that they do which can add value. From the bee perspective, because those are the good guys, aren't they? For most of us, it's like, yeah, they're the pollinators, they're the ones who bring me, the honey or whatever it is, whatever perspective you kind of see, and it's like protect the bees because we know the value there. But again, it's from quite a selfish perspective, isn't it? Because without the bees, we don't get the crops, we don't get the food. So what can we learn mostly then from the bees in this sustainability perspective?
Well, one of the interesting facets of bees is how they make decisions. There is a decision upon the taking of a hive and becoming two hives, of moving from the existence of 30 to 40,000 bees into separating and then becoming two hives of about that same number. The decision making process by which they do so is fascinating in their willingness to share information of where the potential next home might be. For example, usually in the springtime, a group of bees, a hive, will decide that it is necessary to become two. They will, or at least about 60% of them with the queen in tow, will find their way moving to a tree. Many times, and I've had to respond to people in our neighborhood who panic at this time because they see a ball of bees hanging from a tree limb in their yard. During that time, which is 24 to 48 hours, maybe 72, the bees are deciding the next home. They do this by exploring. There's a certain number of forager bees that will become, based upon their desire, to look. They will become scouts who will find the proper um, building, brick area, tree, something usually southern facing, about 15 feet in the air, a number of aspects that will make it more attractive than the others. After finding that location, they'll come back to the hive and they'll continue a dance, which will show the direction, the distance, and with the intensity of the dance, the the promising aspects of what's to decide upon. That debate will continue for 48 hours, 24, 48, 72 hours, during which time bees, other foragers will go and look. They'll come back, they'll enforce that decision until at a point a quorum has been decided, a quorum based upon the information gathered, and then they will move in mass to that location. Now, only 1% to 2% of the entire group knows where they're going to go. Something is happening during that decision where there's not a passionate holding of, oh, this is the decision we need to make, but kind of a leaking of that information so that when the decision is made, there's not a political fight, if you would, for where they're going to go next. We can learn from that. We can learn from the decision making opportunities that bees have in that community about what the next home is going to be.
It's fascinating stuff because again, I'm trying to, as you're describing that, David, what I'm trying to do is kind of almost overlay human either underneath it or on top of it and sort of thinking, okay, so how do we perform? What do we actually do? So those foragers, arguably, you could say they are almost the human evangelists of sustainability. It's important, guys. We need to take action. We need to become more carbon literate. We need to, produce stuff in our communities, and personally, we need to recycle more and think about what we drive and what we eat. And almost they become the evangelists or the kind of the lead storytellers. But there's something really quite subtle in there, isn't there? Because I think certainly from my experience, where those evangelists at a human level begin to struggle is when they use lots of data, lots of science, lots of technical speak, is that they lose the communities that they're trying to influence because it's like, oh, that's just in the too hard to do box. I don't really understand that. So yeah, we'll come back to it. And of course, then they never do.
Right.
Or it's just not felt that it's close enough to home to be relevant. But the bees seem to be doing it differently. The bees seem to be almost rewarding those forager bees, the evangelists, if we call them that, and almost giving them carte blanche to kind of, guys, you tell me where we need to go and we'll follow. Why do you feel there's a breakdown here at a human level then? Because it should be as simple as for the bees, shouldn't it, really?
Well, there's a leakage of information. There's a willingness within the bees to say, okay, my decision isn't as as heartfelt as yours. There's a willingness to not die on your hill because of your belief that this particular location to move to is so much better than the other ones. That's something we lack in our human circle because we don't have um, we do have such a passionate tie to the decision that needs to be made. We can learn because there might be greater opportunities for compromise that we just don't quite see. That we can learn from bees because they do, and within a very short period of time, their diet needs to continually be up, reinforced. They have a very short time, 24 to 48 hours, sometimes 72, before they must be in a new home, and they must start once again finding meals and the sustainability of that particular community.
So is there almost this sense of a need for an innate urgency? It's feeling like it from both the locusts and the bees, and the way you're describing it is that they know that, with the locusts it was the stressor, with the bees it's this need for a base, for a home from which they can then do bee things. And for us as humans, then it doesn't feel necessarily that real pressing urgency because, hey, the sun's still shining today. Hey, the storm isn't coming in my direction. I'm okay. Therefore, I don't feel the need for urgent action. I can hear there's a story. I can hear that these forager bees, the human versions of them, are out there doing and saying this, but I don't feel the urgency because I'm okay. Do you feel that's where we're kind of losing the point here?
Yes, I use a quote from Nietzsche throughout the book, and it's actually not something that I brought to the table. It was something that Viktor Frankl brings to light in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And the quote is, uh, a man with a why can handle almost any how. A man with a why can handle almost any how. It's the why. And that urgency you're talking about is trying to find out where that why is. Why do this? Viktor Frankl is known because of his survival of the Nazi concentration camps. He was a German philosopher, psychologist who, during his time in Auschwitz and other camps, found out that those individuals that survived, those individuals that were able to see the next day, were doing so for one of three reasons. They were searching for, and because they held a desire to do something great, or to spend time with someone that they love and cherished, or because there was a greater purpose in the entire story of what we're doing. He said those three, especially the third one, the why am I going through this, and why do I want to breathe another day? Why do I want to exist another day? Brought to the forefront for humanity, and for him in particular, the desire to do so. It's from a sustainability standpoint. It's why sustain anything. We're questioning it from a philosophical standpoint, not just a scientific one, not just a material one, but a philosophical pursuit of something bigger than ourselves.
Mm. And I think,
And
I was going to say, is it that something bigger than ourselves that, for some of us, it's always the ultimate question, isn't it? It's kind of the why. But for a lot of us, it's kind of, well, that doesn't really matter. I'm just happy doing what I'm doing. And, I can put food on the table. I've got a family, I love sports at the weekend or whatever. I'm just going to do what I do. That's not very bee or locust, is it? That's not community. That is just focusing on what I see in front of me. Is there this kind of almost need to become more bee or more locust by saying, okay, community is bigger, the greater kind of connection is bigger than just me as a sole sort of operator, if you like, in this world? It feels like for most of us we're kind of missing that level of why.
yeah, it is. And one of the things that Viktor Frankl puts on the table is the fact that there's almost a frustration of searching for that makes us more depressed. It makes us more frustrated with the life we're living. It's almost like difficulties and hardships are to our benefit, not to our detriment. With the lack of them, we 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 are in a just angst that we can't seem to get out of. And
Mm.
some perhaps sustainability brings us to that light again. It's not just a, it's not just uh, an irritant. It gets back to why sustain anything? Why have this additional? Are we just oxygen thieves, or is there something beyond us, much more important? And Viktor Frankl does a good job in trying to bring that to the forefront. We don't have an instinctual drive like honeybees or locusts. There isn't something in us. We have to make a decision as a community to remain as a community and move forward as a community.
Mm. Do you think there'll be a tipping point? And I can speculate, as I guess you can, David, about when and where that might be. But it feels for humans, different to bees, different to locusts, that the tipping point is going to be either a temperature, a particular temperature threshold beyond which we have no choice, or there's going to be a certain time scale beyond which it's irreparable and we can't actually go backwards. Do you feel that there needs to almost, for us as humans, be this tipping point, almost to teach us a good lesson? Because it feels there's a hard lesson with some hard knocks to learn here that almost is going to become a non-negotiable.
I think there is, but I don't know if it'll happen at a global level. It'll probably happen more at a community or a national level. What's happening in Western North Carolina, a tipping point, it seems to happen at that level. And we unfortunately do seem to have very short memories that it doesn't quite bring to the surface those things until we're in the midst of it. One of the stories I have in the book is about a tipping point about stress and its importance in my life. My wife and I have a number of children, and our youngest at the time was 3 years old and had been identified as having childhood leukemia. That's, if not addressed, it's a death sentence. And at the age of 3, we found ourselves taking this little boy to a local hospital, UNC Chapel Hill, and beginning chemotherapy treatments. When you begin that on a 3-year-old, it changes the entire picture of your family, and you're holding this little body as his body was going through that. One of the things, though, that confronted us as we started this was a social worker who sat my wife and myself down and pointed out that there was going to be a difficult time not only for my son but for my wife and I and our family. He gave us the statistics that about 60 to 70% of those individuals going through this situation are going to find themselves either bankrupt or divorced in about 2 years. And that made us really relook at how we were living, the decisions we had made, just what we had in front of us. So we sold a number of things. We found ourselves trying to make sure that our household was protected. And we became as a couple stronger, not weaker. We became as a family unit more capable of doing things, not because of what we had gone, well, because we had missed that, but because we went through it. It was the crisis point, like you mentioned, that we had to go through as an individual, a little family unit, and it was good, not bad. My son is now 19. He is healthy, and we got through that 3.5, 4 years of chemotherapy successfully.
Wow, such a powerful story, and it's so nice to kind of hear that there's hope and that there's a positive kind of ending to it, because that is obviously what we all wish for with families and obviously loved ones anyway. So yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Dave, because
Sure.
those kind of vulnerabilities and those moments, I think that's the most profound thing that any of us can do, to kind of share our own journeys with others, to kind of just almost give that opportunity or that invitation to, hey guys, you're listening to this, you're watching this conversation, now just pause, just reflect, and just kind of waken up and sort of wake into this opportunity that, yes, it's at a local level, or as you say, most likely these tipping points will be at a community kind of, or maybe even country level. And then beyond that, we hope then that the collective communities all doing their own things then will help the greater good. Because of course, going back to your bee and locust examples, that is exactly what happens then, isn't it, with these split hives and everything else, is that eventually all of that good comes to bear, because it all helps to fuel all the others doing the same.
Right. Very good.
Mm. Yeah, and that ultimately is what we need to do. So, do you feel hopeful, David? I mean, obviously, after having created the book, and obviously with your kind of journey through sustainability, the family example you gave there, you've clearly seen a lot of opportunities to serve in terms of bringing these messages to bear, being a good citizen, as it were, sort of within your own communities. Do you still feel hope? Because there's a lot of negativity around all of these kinds of topics, isn't there? And you look at the media, and we're constantly served with, it's almost like, oh, we've gone too far, there's no hope. Do you still feel hopeful?
I do. I also hold a position as an environmental engineer, and as a result, I see federal, state, local regulations that deal with environmental issues at those levels. And there's a lot happening that's in a positive manner through all of these. Many people just wring their hands and are frustrated by the fact that these regulations exist, but there's benefit from many of them. And are they being complied with 100%? No, but they're starting down that path. They're working in that direction, and I can see many of them bearing fruit as a result. Um, that gives me a very positive outlook on the direction I see these different communities moving. I also see it from the individuals that see crisis not as such a detrimental impact on their lives, but something that they can grow from. And in almost all of these situations that I've seen, that growth creates strength, not weakness.
Mm. And I guess that's kind of inherent throughout the book, isn't it? Really, this idea that we're here to learn, we're here to almost be in sort of sponge mode, soaking up all these opportunities and these little snippets. Because whilst there are some bigger philosophical, profound things within the book, there are lots of little moments where you think, oh, that's me, or oh, yeah, that's my family, or oh, I could do something there. And it is just a case, isn't it, of just I can select 2 or 3 little things to do, and those things then get momentum, those things build into bigger things. And if we all do that, the problem is solved, isn't it? Because that's what the bees would do, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if solve would be a good way to word it. Many times, sustainability is seen as the end of a journey, but sustainability is a journey. The term is normative in its impact. It's something is more sustainable or less sustainable, more beautiful or less beautiful would be a good way to put it. And you've got to continue understanding that aspect of it, because bees are going to find a new home. Well, they may not successfully find a home that's going to give them the security that they need in the long term, but they usually 60% of the time do. But there are some failures in there. So sustainable is more normative. It might be more sustainable, the location that they've chosen, than it was in the past. And if we can see sustainability and the very concept in normative terms, not an endpoint, but a journey, I think we will be on the right track.
Wonderful. So anybody wanting to go much deeper than this, we only have a few sort of short moments together here, David, don't we, for this conversation? But if somebody wants to go a lot deeper and get a copy of the book, where do they go? How can people get a hold of this?
I've got a website. It's called davidaugebooks.com. And when you first get to that book, if you will give me your email address, I'll give you a one-page summary contrasting the benefits of these two societies and the importance of learning from both.
Wonderful. So people can actually take action. And it's a book about philosophy, it's a book about deep thinking and connection, but it's also super practical. I think that's the thing I really love about your approach, David, is you're actually enabling people to do things. So it is the why, but it's also the what can I do next, which I think is so critical right now, isn't it?
Yes it is.
Absolutely. David Auge, thank you so much for your time and wisdom today.
Great. Thank you, Neil.